People are always alarmed when the federal government, whether it's the FBI or some other Department of Justice entity, comes snooping around because it's kind of a slippery slope.
We know P. Diddy is in hot water, from the federal raids on two of his homes to dozens of accusations, ranging from sex trafficking and rape to being the kingpin in a RICO enterprise. But now, one of the main Diddy accusers is pointing the finger at some top record labels, too.
If there's some, unethical, illegal things going on, everybody's antennas are up right now who has any involvement with it because who knows where that investigation can lead.
Lil Rod is doubling down, saying not only did Universal Music Group and its top execs know about Diddy's alleged sex trafficking venture, but he says they were there when sex workers were in the studio.
It would matter if the sex workers were plying their trade or they were just there in the studio.
And Lil Rod says he has proof.
And I can imagine that if you had a room that had many people in it and nefarious things are going on, people are going to have their phones out.
Plus, there was the accusation that Lil Rod never got paid for his work on Diddy's Love album, but that the sex workers did.
If there are some people who've done some things wrong and in some way are related to Diddy and his group, they're nervous right now.
Let's get the basics out of the way before we take a deep dive into the nitty-gritty of those newly released court docs. During the last week of March, federal investigators raided the homes belonging to 54-year-old Sean Combs. He's better known as the rapper, label exec, and entrepreneur P. Diddy, or Puffy, or Puff Daddy. He goes by a lot of different names, but whatever you call him, we know for sure that two of his homes were investigated by Homeland Security after the execution of a search warrant. No criminal charges have been filed against Diddy. I asked criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Matt Mangino about this. But what do you think, Matt? Do you think it's only a matter of time before he faces federal charges?
Well, Diddy is facing a lot of different things from a lot of different venues, so to speak. So you have civil lawsuits that have been filed. In fact, you have one civil lawsuit that was actually settled. But you have a number of these cases swirling around that are talking about sex trafficking, that are talking about rape, talking about sexual abuse. So those issues are out there. And then, of course, you have the federal government, Homeland Security, going to his homes in Los Angeles, in Miami. Normally, in order to get the federal government involved, there has to be something there. I mean, typically the federal government cherry picks cases. So they pick the best cases they can find. They don't just jump into any case. So, where there's smoke, there's fire, and you have to have at least probable cause to get a search warrant. So you have some evidence of wrongdoing that involves, Diddy or somebody related, closely associated with Diddy, for the federal government to get involved in the way that they have.
It's likely that several civil lawsuits paved the way for the search warrant and subsequent investigations, like that of Cassandra Ventura, known as the singer Cassie. She filed a lawsuit late last year revealing that Diddy raped her, beat her, forced her to have sex with prostitutes, and recorded it during their years-long relationship. That specific lawsuit was settled in just one day, but multiple other women brought on civil suits in the same time frame, alleging abuse to the point of losing consciousness, rape, and recording these sexual assaults.
Well, yeah, there certainly could be, some link between these alleged victims who have filed the lawsuit, providing information to the federal government. It's really kind of tricky here, Sierra, when you think about these things. So the civil cases, in order to successfully prove a civil case, all you have to do is prove by a preponderance of the evidence that somebody committed a wrongful act against you and caused you harm. In a criminal case, we know in order to convict somebody that you have to do it beyond a reasonable doubt, which is substantially greater burden of proof. But we're talking kind of in between the two when we talk about probable cause. So probable cause is there is it likely that a crime was committed and that this person or this place, if it's a search warrant, could reveal some evidence related to that crime. So we're trying to balance these different burdens of proof, burdens of suspicion. But all, from the outset, we have to also say, hey, he hasn't been found liable of anything. And certainly he hasn't even been charged with any criminal offense at this point.
At least one of the lawsuits you mentioned has already been settled, but there are four more. Some of them are demanding that they go to a jury trial. What would a timeline for all of that look like? Could it be years that Diddy is settling or going to court in relation to these civil suits?
Well, it certainly could be years, because there's in a civil case, there's a lot that goes into preparing that civil case. So after a complaint is filed, whatever that response of pleading is, whatever the defendant in that civil suit decides to do, they could file preliminary objections saying, "Hey, you don't have enough evidence in this case." Could there ultimately be a summary judgment filed? Which those all take time, but then ultimately you're going to get into discovery. So you're going to exchange written questions. You're going to conduct depositions. All that takes time as well. So, when you're looking at a civil case, there's no time constraints. There's no speedy trial rule in a civil case. That those cases could take years, and you could negotiate the whole time trying to settle it as well.
But it was a lawsuit in February that really laid everything out, listing Diddy and big music conglomerates as defendants. It's a 74-page lawsuit brought on by Rodney Jones, also known as Lil Rod. His civil suit lays out many bombshells, including more allegations of sexual assault, forced sex with prostitutes, gun trafficking, illicit drug use, sex with underage girls, and that there's allegedly record of much of this activity. Lil Rod's lawsuit straight up says he has, quote, hundreds of hours of footage and audio recordings of Mr. Combs, his staff, and his guests engaging in some serious illegal activity because Diddy apparently required Lil Rod to record him constantly. Several pictures are included in that original lawsuit, including pics of Lil Rod allegedly in bed with a prostitute, the aftermath of a shooting that Diddy allegedly covered up, and other high-profile names that Diddy allegedly groomed Lil Rod for. All that brings us to the latest court docs filed by Lil Rod's attorney just this week. And with these new filings, we get more pictures and proof of recordings. Here, the lawsuit shows a screenshot of a video taken on September 30th, 2022. According to the suit, it shows inside Chalice recording studio where Justin Combs, Diddy's son, allegedly solicited a sex worker. Additional screenshots show a similar scene on September 15th, 2022. Also inside Chalice recording studio where Justin Combs again allegedly solicited a sex worker. Matt says these photos definitely bring up some good questions.
Well, I guess, Sarah, it would matter if the sex workers were plying their trade or they were just there in the studio, observing what goes on. I mean, sex workers, they don't work 24 hours a day. I mean, so they have a job, and they have other things that they do. So yeah, if you have a photograph with a sex worker and she's completely clothed and you're smiling at the camera, I don't think that's an issue. Now, if you have photographs of people engaging in sex in the studios, I think there you have a problem.
So as of right now, we only have screenshots of photos, but there's allegedly videos. So is it possible that there is video recording of people engaging in sex with these sex workers? Is that something that could potentially come out during discovery?
Hey, we know everything gets taped now. I mean, case after case that we examine, you have cell phone tapes, you have surveillance video, you have doorbells. I mean, we don't know, what's being taped and what's not being taped in the society that we live in today. And I can imagine that if you had a room that had many people in it and nefarious things are going on, people are going to have their phones out, unless they have a phone box at the door and everybody has to drop their phone in it before they come in. who knows? But I wouldn't be surprised if there is videotape of some of these incidents.
According to these new court docs, Lil Rod, quote, personally saw executives from the defendant record label present at the recording sessions during the times that sex workers were present. The defendant recording studio that Lil Rod refers to could be a few possibilities. Listed as defendants in the suit are Diddy, his son, and a few of his associates, but also Chalice Recording Studios, Love Records, Motown Records, Universal Music Group, and two top execs, Ethiopia Habtemariam, the former CEO of Motown, and Lucian Charles Grange, the current CEO of UMG. The original suit was filed on February 26th, but on March 29th, Ethiopia was dropped as a defendant. She released a statement saying, quote, being falsely accused of criminal conduct is deeply upsetting to me. I did no wrong. I never saw or participated in any alleged racketeering enterprise, and I never saw, aided, or abetted, or tried to conceal any sex trafficking activity. In short, there's no basis for any of the claims asserted against me, and I should never have been named a defendant in this lawsuit. Lil Rod's newest filing actually mentions this too. He says that on March 4th, defendants sent Lil Rod's team an angry letter, quote, accusing plaintiff of lying and fabricating the claims in the FAC. That's the first amended complaint. So Lil Rod says he considered this new information and Ethiopia's declaration, and she was dropped from the suit a few weeks later. But other record labels and a different CEO are still listed. So why would they drop one CEO and leave the other?
Well, that's an interesting question, but there must have been something that was brought to the plaintiff's attention or their legal counsel that, hey, this defendant you have listed is not an appropriate defendant. They're in no way involved in this. Maybe it's a timing thing when you look at the sort of the timeline on this case, that it's impossible that she could have been involved or could have condoned any of this activity. So sometimes plaintiffs are faced with the possibility that, hey, this is wrong. She doesn't fit into this picture that you're trying to paint, but you're leaving her in there. You could have problems yourself, for going forward with a case like that. The other defendants, again, I would be surprised if we don't see some effort to get them removed from this suit. But if they stay in the case, discovery is going to be an interesting process.
Lil Rod's latest filing goes on to say that dropping Ethiopia's name from the civil suit was, quote, not good enough for the defendants, as they are desperate to distance themselves from defendant Sean Combs. And that could be defendants like UMG or its CEO. For instance, Lucian Charles Grange, he's still listed as a defendant. His name hasn't been dropped. But if his team is working to drop his name, what would they do in order to get that to happen?
Well, there are certain things that you can do pre-trial, like a preliminary objection. Say, hey, this person should not be included in this case. You don't have, subject matter jurisdiction over him because he had no relationship to anything that happened to the plaintiff in this case. Rodney Jones. You want to argue those issues. The other thing then, if that doesn't work, is you could ask for a summary judgment and say, I want the court to declare me as the winner in this lawsuit, me individually, because they haven't proven anything against me, or they haven't made any specific allegation against me that would make me liable in this case. So there's different stages where that issue could come up, but I'm sure those issues are going to be vigorously fought over as this case proceeds.
That leads us to another allegation that UMG and other defendants don't have the receipts. And according to Lil Rod's team, they gave the defendants a major heads up that they'd be asking for this info. Lil Rod alleges that the defendants are desperately relying on his lack of access to these documents to justify dismissing the case. He's actually asking for a lot of information from them. So things like tax filings, phone records, wire transfers. Are all these things appropriate that he's asking for? Would they just have to hand them over as part of a civil suit?
Well, they may be appropriate, but I think the first question is going to be, are these defendants appropriate? And so I'm sure there's going to be some challenge by these named defendants with regard to whether or not they should be sued or not. But discovery. If these defendants, whether it's Universal or some of the officers of Universal, or Motown, are left in the case, so they remain as defendants. Discovery's very broad. Okay, so you can ask for a lot of different information. You can ask a lot of questions at a deposition, some that would normally be objectionable during a trial. But if you can show that your questions might lead to relevant or admissible evidence, they still have to answer those questions. Now, that deposition may never make it into court or any part of it. Some of it may, but that's a very broad spectrum. When you say, "Hey, my question, you can object to it, but you have to answer it because it might lead me to admissible or relevant evidence."
Then there's Lil Rod's exclusive recording agreement, or ERA. This dates back to May 4th, 2022, when Lil Rod signed on to work with Diddy. In Lil Rod's filing this week, his team included all 63 pages of that contract. Much of it has been redacted. He alleges the defendants intentionally redacted essential sections of the ERA to hide the details of how they agreed to share profits, losses, ownership of the partnership assets, liability to creditors, compensation for the defendants, and loans to the organization. Lil Rod says UMG turned a blind eye to Diddy's illegal activity, saying Diddy had access to at least $1.3 million worth of so-called free money. But Matt says it's not up to UMG to keep track of what Diddy spends his money on.
Well, that would be extreme. If we think about our own lives, what if you picked up your paycheck, this Friday, and the company said, "Hey, what are you going to spend this money on? What are you going to do? Where are you going tonight? Where's this money going?" I mean, that's unrealistic. That your employer, even if it is large sums of money, if you've earned that money, I mean, you can do it with you want. Now, of course, if you're doing illegal things with it, well, you're putting yourself in jeopardy. I don't think anybody would necessarily say that if an employee committed a crime with their paycheck, that their employer is responsible for it. Now, that's kind of simplifying it. We're not really looking at exactly what the allegations are. I think a much better argument, if they have one at all, would be that these people were somehow involved in this conduct directly. You know, at parties or meetings or gatherings, or they knew what was going on at these meetings and gatherings and didn't do anything about it, almost like it was on company time. Then you might be able to make a connection. But saying you pay somebody and they use their money for illegal activity is a reach for an employer.
Lil Rod is bold enough to say that UMG and other labels are partners in the quote, Combs Rico enterprise. Lil Rod says the CEO of Universal Music Group exerted some control over the Combs Rico enterprise and recklessly disregarded the existence of sex trafficking. That's a pretty big allegation to put on the
Mhm.
CEO of Universal Music Group. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, I mean that's a significant allegation, and you better have some real good evidence to back that up, because you're making a claim that has far-reaching implications for the person that's the target of those claims. But I think we don't want to get confused again by the idea of RICO. So again, this is not a criminal case. And RICO is a racketeering statute, a federal racketeering statute, and states have their own RICO statutes as well. But the federal racketeering, it would have to be a criminal enterprise. So while we're talking about things like rape, sexual abuse, um, we're not talking about them in a criminal context when we're talking about Jones's case because he's filed a civil action. He's suing uh, Diddy and the others in civil court. So you might have these terms thrown around a little bit, maybe even mentioned in the complaint, but they're more like sort of decoration. They really don't go to the substance of the civil case, which you have to prove.
Then there's the allegation that Lil Rod's contract was a sham and that Universal Music Group didn't make Diddy adhere to the contract. Lil Rod says UMG and others were, quote, complicit, sloppy, and grossly negligent. They provided Sean Combs with $1.3 million upon signing the ERA without ever receiving an invoice or proof of what he was using that money for. Then there's the other allegation that Rodney Jones was never paid for his work on Diddy's Love album. So he produced 9 songs. That we know for sure. The album came out, but he says that he didn't get paid for any of it. Is this something that could be easily proved? I mean, look through his pay stubs or his bank account and see that nothing was there.
Oh, I would think so. I mean, I wouldn't think that he's going to be the producer of this music, and they're going to come over and put a pile of cash in front of them. I mean, these companies file tax returns. They have they have payroll. They have these are sophisticated companies. Um, I mean, that should be easily traceable. If how long did it take you to produce 9 songs, and how did you survive necessarily without getting paid while that work was going on? I mean, there's a lot of questions that would have to be answered about that, but I think there's got to be a paper trail.
So, who does the responsibility fall on? There's a lot of allegations about rape, the sex workers, as we talked about, shootings that sometimes, or people using illicit drugs. There's a lot happening there. And that begs the question, is it up to the record label, the studio, to make sure that there's security there? Is that something that they could be liable for, not having the proper security, allowing people to bring in guns or underage girls, things like that?
Well, I think if illegal conduct is happening on company property and company people know about it, that could be a problem. Okay. Um, Listen, we know from what we read in the tabloids and things like that that entertainers and famous people can be pretty particular and they can get easily agitated, and they're your breadwinner, so you don't want to make your star mad if you can avoid it. And so I'm sure that things happen or things are tolerated more than they might be down at XYZ Corporation's office. Um, but still, that doesn't eliminate your responsibility if people are being abused, if people are being victimized, on your company property. That can open the door to having some responsibility. Now, if everything at the studio is fine and everything at the office is fine, but downtown at the hotel where they've um, uh, reserved a suite, I mean, then I don't think you can hold a company accountable for that. Even if you have rumors that, hey, bad things might be going on down there, there is the private life and your professional life, and I don't think necessarily that an employer can be responsible for an employee's private life.
But is it possible that the allegations in this civil suit against, for instance, the CEO of Universal Music Group could lead to federal investigations into him and potentially federal charges?
Well, people are always alarmed when the federal government, whether it's the FBI or some other Department of Justice entity, comes snooping around because it's kind of a slippery slope. I mean, sometimes the federal government will come in, they might be looking at something specific and they find something altogether different that's illegal. So I'm sure if there's some unethical, illegal things going on, everybody's antennas are up right now who has any involvement with it, because who knows where that investigation can lead. I mean, who and what they're always looking for in any type of criminal investigation, when there's multiple people involved, is someone who's willing to talk about it. Someone who is the nomenclature, someone who's willing to roll over and start giving information. And so, I would think that if there are some people who've done some things wrong, and in some way are related to Diddy and his group, they're nervous right now.
So, what do the defendants have to say about all this? Lucian Grange's attorney says adding his name as a defendant to the civil suit is an attempt to fit a square peg into a round hole. Donald Zacharin, who represents Universal Music Group, Motown Records, and Grange, recently made a filing including sworn statements from 2 executives at UMG who counter what Jones has alleged. Zacharin also makes clear UMG has no ownership in Love Records. That's another defendant that's listed in the suit. Diddy's most recent statement about the allegations dates back to 2023 when he made a social media post reading, quote, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation, and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth." As for the federal raids, Diddy's team calls it a gross overuse of military-level force, saying there's no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities, or the way his children and employees were treated. In response to Lil Rod's lawsuit, Diddy's team says in part, quote, "His reckless name-dropping about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. We have overwhelming, indisputable proof that his claims are complete lies." So what's ahead for Diddy, his civil lawsuits, and the other defendants listed? Well, that remains to be seen, but whenever any new developments do come down the pipeline, we've got you covered with the latest. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Gillespie.